Alright everybody, what's up? My name is Bobby Gaines, and those of you who are not so new to my channel know that I've been talking about the Boston Celtics for the past, God, I don't know, 10, 11 years now. Ever since they blew up the Big Three, which, now seems like an eternity ago, they traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, along with Jason Terry and a few other players, to the Brooklyn Nets for what would end up being a whole crap ton of draft picks and some other players, and I can still remember how I felt after that trade. I felt pretty hopeless. I was talking about, how did the Celtics get back to being good, let alone championship good, but this was a rant that, today's rant, this is a rant that I always knew would eventually happen. For a while it looked like it wasn't going to happen for a long time, but I can finally say that the Celtics are the 2024 NBA champions, that they are the champions at all. And it was not an easy process getting here, which is what makes me appreciate this all the more. I know the national, storyline on this year's team is, oh, they had an easy route, they didn't have to beat anybody, the Heat didn't have Butler, and Indiana didn't have whoever, and this one and that one, and I'm not denying that, and I'm not even saying that Dallas is the hardest team they could have beaten in the finals, but they beat who they beat, and more than that, they did have a hard road to the finals, just not this year. Go with me here, As a Celtics fan for the last, even before the rebuild, because I started following the Celtics in 07, and I remember when they got Garnett and Allen to go along with Pierce, and just how excited I was for that. But, after that, most of my time being a Celtics fan was watching them try to get out of the cellar, watching them become a playoff team, watching them improve year after year. And so, to me, the road to the finals started in, 2018 or so, 2019, when they had Kyrie Irving. They traded, well, they didn't trade him. He went to another team. He went to the Nets, and then they got Kemba Walker, and then, Gordon Hayward, who never really lived up to his potential. Not really his fault. There was the ankle injury, and he came back, and he was okay. But we never really got to see what that big three might have looked like with Hayward, Horford, and Irving. God, I can still remember when they got Al Horford, and that was their big acquisition, because the whole narrative was, and still is to a degree, people don't want to play in Boston, signing free agents for the Celtics, even when they had the talent of Pierce and Garnett, they couldn't draw other free agents in, and, even just getting Al Horford was a big deal. It was hey, an all-star player. I'm not going to say he's the superstar, but Al Horford was an all-star, still is, he's still on the Celtics, but, back when they first got Al Horford, that was kind of a turning point for me. That was hey, we're actually going to try to win now. Because, like I said, 2013, whenever I did my first Celtics video, it's what are the Celtics doing? They have Rajon Rondo and a bunch of scrubs. They eventually drafted Marcus Smart, who I actually grew to love as a player, and I'll get to talking about him in a little bit. Because this rant I don't really have a format for. I planned to do a rant like this as soon as the Celtics won the title, about a week and a half ago now. I planned on doing this kind of thing. And what kind of made me think about it was the NBA draft is tonight. And normally the NBA draft, especially 5 or 6 years ago, was something I paid a lot of attention to as a Celtics fan. Not necessarily because I wanted to see who they would draft, but because I wanted to see if they'd make any big moves. I wanted to see if, they would flip a few picks for, a Jimmy Butler or a Paul George. I remember for many years it was Kevin Love, it was Kevin Love would be in Boston every offseason. We'd be oh, Celtics going to get Kevin Love or whatever, it was we were desperate for a star player, and our star player ended up being Isaiah Thomas. But backing up a little bit, the NBA draft was a huge deal, and they did draft 2 stars, finally, the Celtics did, with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. And at the time, I was skeptical that they traded out a number 1, because the Celtics finally got the number 1 pick, which is something they just never were able to do, even when they were tanking. They would have a bad season, they'd get the number 5 pick or something. So they finally get the number 1 pick via Brooklyn, and they trade down to number 3, and I'm what are you guys doing? You finally got number 1, why are you going down to number 3? Whatever. But they took Jason Tatum, which turned out to be the better pick. Now, could they have taken Tatum at number 1? Probably, but again, whatever. Everything happened for a reason. It's really crazy to think about that. Same with, the number 3 pick where they took Jaylen Brown. Now, I do plan to make a montage of all my former Celtics rants, some kind of variation of that, and I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty sure, other Celtics fans, I was who the heck is Jaylen Brown? You're taking this guy with number 3? This isn't a guy you couldn't have gotten later in the draft, but as it turns out, Jaylen Brown might be my favorite player on the Celtics and has been for a long time, and this season kind of solidified it with his, I think he was an all-star, but also Finals MVP and Eastern Conference MVP. For the Eastern Conference Finals, and that big shot he took against Indiana. I could talk about so many things here. I want to try to keep this rant within a sort of acceptable length, but obviously there's a lot to get to. But yeah, the draft tonight, like, I really don't care. I'm going to be perfectly honest. Like, I'll watch it. I want to see, like, who goes 1 and 2 or whatever. But, like, as far as the Celtics, I don't know. They're picking 30th. I don't really care who they pick. I don't see them trading for anyone big. I don't think they need to. That's the whole thing, is they've gotten to a point now, and I'm not trying to brag, but they've gotten to a point now where they're not chasing the Kevin Durant of the world. They're not chasing Kevin Love. They're not chasing Paul George, all these names, previous trade deadlines too. That was my other frustration, was the trade deadline. It was always like draft day and the trade deadline. I'd be like, who are they going to get? Who are they going to get? And they either wouldn't get anyone, or they'd get some like role player. And I'd be like, that's it? Like, really? We're not going for it? All right. And I would just kind of fall back on that. So, things went up and down with me for the Celtics. You may notice that for a while, in between almost every offseason, I did a Celtics rant, and then going into the new season, I would do a Celtics rant, and I was really excited about the Celtics, I'd say around 2017, 2018, when they were starting to build a better team. And then, like, last year or the year before that, I kind of stopped doing that. I got excited when they made the finals against the Warriors. That was a huge step. They were almost like the Buffalo Bills of basketball. Like, they made, 7 straight Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think it was 7 straight, but it was a lot of Eastern Conference Finals. No finals appearances. Finally, they win the Eastern Conference. They go up against the Warriors. I didn't think they were going to win that series. They didn't win that series, but they made it interesting, and I was actually okay with that. I know at times I come off as just this, really pompous, arrogant, greedy fan, I want it all. I want the championship every year. Well, of course I do. I'm a fan of a team. I want them to win. I want them to reach the highest goal they can reach, and I felt at that point, even before 2022, I felt like, that team was capable of at least reaching a championship. Doesn't mean I thought they could win one, but I thought they could at least reach it. And then 2023 happened, and then this is why you haven't really heard me talk Celtics for a long time. And that's why even the thought of wearing a Celtics hat was not on the table for me. The 2023 Eastern Conference Finals really broke me. There's no denying that. Going down 0-3 to the Heat, and it's not even that they went down 0-3 to the Heat, it's how they did it. They lost 2 home games, because finally the Celtics, I thought, after, again, this goes back to my whole road to the finals, after years of being the little brother to the Cavs, to the Bucks, the Sixers, actually they always beat the Sixers, but I felt like there were always 2 or 3 teams in front of the Celtics. Heck, even the Nets at one point leapfrogged the Celtics with having Irving, Harden, and Durant. So it was like, God damn it, when are the Celtics going to be the top dog? And it looked like in 2023 they had finally done it. They had the best team in the East, the best record in the East. They got past the Bucks, they got past the Sixers, and all right, now you got to beat the Heat. And I realized the Miami Heat had a good season. Actually, they didn't have to play the Bucks that year because Miami beat the Bucks. But my point being, this is it. This is your road to the finals. And I didn't think they could beat the Nuggets, by the way. So even if the Celtics had made the finals in 2023 last year, I don't know that they win it. But to me, you had to win that. To me, you would become the Cavaliers now, where you're in the conference finals, you're in the finals almost every year. So, building off that what I thought was an excellent 2022 season. I know losing the finals is not an accomplishment, but it kind of was for a team that had struggled so long to get there. But you go to 2023 now, and they lay an absolute egg. And not in Game 1, not in Game 2, but in Game 3 at Miami, going to Miami down 0-2, you figure it's going to be a desperation situation. The Celtics are going to come out firing on all cylinders. Just the opposite. They get blown out by 35 points. It was never a close game. And I was done at that point. I think that's when I said, I'm not wearing my Celtics hat. I'm not wearing any of my Celtics stuff. I'm done. Because you basically, if you're the Celtics, I'm even getting mad thinking about it, and they won the title this year. But it's like you flushed down an opportunity to go back to the finals. You basically said, I don't care. Threw it out. All the progress you made, you just decided wasn't worth it. And then something miraculous and or frustrating happened, which is the Celtics played 2 games in a row. I say 2, and I'll get to why it's only 2. Game 4 and 5 of that Eastern Conference Finals, where the Celtics were absolutely the best team on the floor, maybe the best team in the league. They completely imposed their will on Miami and in Boston. I mean, they were good from shooting threes. They were good on defense. They were good moving the basketball. I mean, they obliterated the Heat in 2 straight games, and I'm going, where was this for the first couple games of the series? Now, Game 6, it was almost the same story. They had a really good first 3 quarters, and then they almost blew that game, as we all know. Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, it took a Derek White tip-in with 0.1 seconds to go to save the Celtics season and force Game 7. And at that point, as precarious as that win was, I honestly thought the Celtics were going to pull it out and win Game 7 somehow. Whether they blew them out, whether it was a close game, I thought there's no way the Celtics go back to Boston and lose a Game 7. Well, you know what happened. They went to Game 7, they lost in Boston to the Heat, and they didn't just lose, they lost by like 18 or 20 points. So I'm like, okay. So you had your chance, you were the top dogs in the East, you went down 0-3 to a team you had no business going down 0-3 to. I don't care how good the Heat are. I'm not saying they're not a good team. They had a great 7-game series with them in 2022, but you can't lose like that. You can't lose in Miami by 35 points or whatever. Like, absolutely unacceptable. And that's when I was done. You know, to me, nothing short of making that comeback was going to get me back on the Celtics bandwagon. So I was done, you know, pissed off, whatever. And then, you know, the Celtics made a couple of really great trades in this offseason. They got Kristaps Porzingis, who they traded Marcus Smart for. And I do want to address Marcus Smart, but first I want to talk about getting Porzingis. I thought that was a great move. I thought getting Drew Holiday was a great move. But again, at this point, I'm off the bandwagon. That's why I didn't make a Celtics preview this season. I'm like, you know what? I don't care. They got a couple more good players. They're going to blow it in the playoffs like they always do. That's honestly where my mind was at. You know, Joe Mazzulla I thought was a terrible coach, especially his first year. Or I guess that was his first year because Udoka got fired. But anyway, yeah, I'm like, okay, they got a couple really good players. They got a really good team. I'll watch them. You know, they'll win some games. And then they did. You know, they got off to a really good start. And I'm like, okay, that's what I expected them to do. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of it, you know, because when the Celtics were this fledgling team with Isaiah Thomas and Jay Crowder and Marcus Smart, it was like, okay, let's just see how far they can get. You know, you were just happy they made the playoffs. You were happy they made it to the second or third round. You know, you didn't care that they got blown out by the Cavaliers because they were supposed to get blown out by the Cavaliers. You didn't care that, you know what I'm saying? Like, they were just competitive. And then they started to, you know, advance, you know, and Tatum got better, Brown got better, and they had this really good team. And that's kind of the double-edged sword of like, okay, you have this really good team, now you're not happy anymore. Because now, if you don't win the championship, you're pretty pissed off. And if you don't even make it to the conference finals, you're even more pissed off. Like, they got to a point where they advanced so far, there was only one more step to advance. And they made that last step as hard as they could, to the point where, again, it was just how they lost to Miami. If they had lost to Miami in a different way, and maybe I don't feel the same way, and maybe I still go into this past season with a lot more enthusiasm, but it was just hard for me to get excited about a team where it was like the keys to the castle had been gifted to them like 3 years ago, and they kept blowing it. Even in 2020, I can remember I flipped out that they lost to the Heat in the bubble. And again, I thought they would lose those finals. Like, it's not that I thought the Celtics were going to win the finals 4 years in a row, but it felt like they were contenders and just kind of kicked it down the road. And I'm thinking like, all right, it's just going to be like, you know, the 2000s Phoenix Suns, where they're a really good team, but they never really get past, you know, the conference finals. Because there are teams like that. There are plenty of teams in the NBA, in any sport. You know, what was it, the Atlanta Braves in baseball won like 14 straight division titles and one World Series, or no World Series. Like, I mean, there's plenty of examples of teams that are really good and just never get it done. And then you had teams like the Toronto Raptors more recently in basketball, where they just build a super team in 1 year and they win it. And now, you know, they're not good now, but at least they won it. And finally, I can say the Celtics won it. And now I'm going to get to my Marcus Smart point, which is that, you know, I like Marcus Smart. Heck, I love Marcus Smart. Even when this team wasn't doing well, even when I was, like, kind of down on the star players, I was like, you know what, Marcus Smart's getting out there. He's getting after the ball. He's playing great defense. Yeah, he takes some dumb threes, but they all take dumb threes. I thought he was, like, the heart and soul of the team, even if he wasn't the best player on the team. And, you know, since they traded Smart, and people were sad about it, and I was sad about it too, but there seemed to be this narrative that, like, oh, Smart was the problem. You know, they went out and got Drew Holiday, who played just as good defense, and, you know, Porzingis, obviously, they needed a big inside. You know, you couldn't always count on Robert Williams, but when you could, he was a damn good player, which is what I'm saying. You know, Marcus Smart was on the 2022 and the 2023 Celtics. Those are both teams that legitimately could have won the championship. Now, they didn't. But, you know, you make the NBA Finals, I'm sorry, you have like a 50% chance to lose. That's just how it is. A lot of good teams have lost in the Finals to just better teams. Same with 2023. They could have made the Finals with Marcus Smart. So this idea that, like, you know, they were so far away from the Finals with Marcus Smart, you know, he was holding them back, you know, like, what did he hold them back from? Like, he was one of the few players, like, putting in his all in those games against Miami and the games, you know, in the Finals in 2022. I realized they weren't great, but, I mean, that series still went 6 games. And they had a 2-1 series lead at one point. I'm not saying they beat the Warriors, but was Marcus Smart the reason they lost that finals? Seriously? Like, was he? Maybe. I don't remember every detail of it, but same with 2023 against Miami. Was it Marcus Smart's fault they were down 3-0 to the Heat? Because I don't remember him really having any big gaffes. I remember, you know, Tatum and Brown playing like crap. I remember, what's his name? I can't remember his name now. Grant Williams harassing Jimmy Butler in Game 2, and then the Heat come back in that game. Like, I can remember, like, little things like that, but I can't remember a moment where I'm like, oh, Marcus Smart, you screwed us again. Like, I don't remember that. And I'm not saying Marcus Smart didn't have his boneheaded moments. He didn't get dumb fouls. He didn't, go over the top sometimes. He didn't, take threes. I mean, even that shot that Derek White put in was a stupid three that Marcus Smart took. If Marcus Smart misses that and we lose the series, a lot of people are going to point to that. But, unfortunately, we dragged that one more game and got blown out in Game 7. But my thing is, and again, you had to trade Smart to get Porzingis. I get that. And I would absolutely do it again. I would take Porzingis over Marcus Smart. It's not a matter of thinking Smart's a bad player, but Porzingis is both really talented and something you didn't have, which is a reliable big player. I say reliable, he missed the whole playoffs this year, but generally reliable player who can make threes, because you seem to love taking threes, and plays really good defense. That was what Porzingis gave you that you didn't have. And, oh, by the way, you got Drew Holiday, which was a really funny, in my opinion, backfire of the Damian Lillard trade. Because when the Bucks got Damian Lillard, I was almost like, okay, now the Celtics are really screwed. Now they're back to being the second best team in the East because you got Giannis and Damian Lillard on the same team. But one thing I did notice is that the Bucks traded Drew Holiday, who was a really good number 3, number 2, wherever you want to put him. He was a really good player for the Bucks. They traded him to Portland, and Portland, wasn't going to keep him. So I'm like, could the Celtics get Drew Holiday? And I'm like, it almost seems too good of a move. The Celtics don't make moves like that. It's too smart, some pun intended. But they got Drew Holiday, and now I'm like, okay, well now you got rid of Marcus Smart, but you replaced him with somebody who's just as good, if not better, although he's older, but you got a guy in Drew Holiday who plays really tight defense, can get you 15 points a game. That was a really good pickup. And obviously the rest is history. You take that team, they buzzsawed through the regular season. I don't care, people want to say they had an easy path in the playoffs. Yes, they did go 0-2 against Denver. I'm not unaware of that. I think the Denver Nuggets still would have been a bad matchup for them in this year's finals, but they didn't have to play them. That's just how it works. The Western Conference played itself out. The Dallas Mavericks came out of the West. Celtics came out of the East after what might have been the hardest sweep I've ever seen. They swept the Pacers, but none of those games were easy. They had to come back in Game 3. They barely won Game 4. They had to win Game 1 in overtime in Boston. So, kudos to the Pacers for taking the Celtics to 4 games. I know it sounds really weird to say, but that was a really hard-fought series. And yeah, the Celtics eventually ended up where I thought they should have ended up a few years ago. So better late than never. Tatum and Brown get their first title. I'm excited about it. Now here's the thing. Do I think they're going to repeat? I honestly don't. I know, I don't mean to put a wet blanket on things. I know, Celtics fans are jazzed up. Banner 19, here we come, and all that. I think they'll be really good next year. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be. Like I said, even just looking at this year's draft and any trades they might make in the offseason, I don't think there's a lot they need to do. There probably will be a few moves. Derek White could be a free agent. There could be some other things they have to do to reshuffle the deck. But, I think we're looking at another 1 seed in the East and another competitive season. But that said, to repeat as champions, a lot of things have to go right. You have to get no injuries or very few injuries, I don't think you do as well without Porzingis for a majority of the season. Now, they did miss him in the playoffs, but he came back for 2 games in the finals. Other than Game 1, he really didn't do much. But my point is, you bring this team back next year, you probably win another 55, 60 games, which is probably good enough for the 1 seed. And again, I'm getting way ahead of myself here because it's a long NBA season. And like I said, I think they'll make the playoffs. They'll be a 1 seed. They should make it to the conference finals. Even then, I'm not going to be that disappointed. After you win a championship, at least for me, when the Red Sox won the championship in 2004, I didn't really expect them to win again for a while. Now they won again in 2007, but to me, I'm, too excited to really think about what the future has. Yeah, I want them to win again. I don't want to wait another 16 years for a championship, but I think they'll win another championship in the next 5 or 6 years. I think they might win more than that. I don't see them repeating. Now, that's not an insult. That's not oh, God, they suck. No, I just think it's really hard to repeat. I could see Denver beating them next year if they get back to the finals. I could see, I don't know. We don't know what other moves could happen. The 76ers could get better. The Bucks could get better. There are still other good teams in the East. It just, this year was kind of a weak year for the East for whatever reason. Celtics took advantage. The Celtics did what they had to do, in my opinion. To me, they didn't exceed expectations. They met expectations. They had to be a really good team. They had the kind of monkey hanging over them from last year's loss to Miami, where it's okay, the only thing you can do to redeem yourself is literally to do what they did, which is go through the Eastern Conference Finals and go through the finals. And they did both those things. So yeah, the whole different here thing, at first I was kind of mocking it, because I'm yeah, it's different here. Okay, yeah, you guys are only going to lose by 10 in the playoffs now. It's no, they made the playoffs, and they didn't have any of those moments where I'm going, here we go again, And I will admit, as early as Game 2 of the first round, I did have one of those moments where, the Heat came back to win that game, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Is it really different here? It was. They only lost 3 games in the whole playoffs. That they had that really bizarre blowout loss in Game 4 of the finals to the Mavericks, which a lot of people say it's because they wanted to win the finals in Boston. I'm almost starting to agree with that. But, no, either way, it was a long road getting here. You had your ups and downs. I mean, even Brad Stevens. I haven't even mentioned Brad Stevens yet. When they first hired Brad Stevens, that was another one where I'm going, Brad Stevens? Who the hell's this guy? Like, that was the coach to replace Doc Rivers. I'm like, is this just some young guy they're hiring for a few years, and then they're, when the Celtics get better, they'll hire a veteran coach? But no, he was always the plan. And he was a great coach, honestly. As great of a GM as he is, and he really has. I thought that was another move. Almost every move the Celtics have made to this point, I've been like, what are they doing? Like, why aren't they getting, Jimmy Butler? Why aren't they getting Kevin Durant? Why aren't they getting this one or that one? I know it's not all in their control, but, like, why are we getting, like, Brad Stevens to be our new GM? Why aren't we getting, like, a more established GM? But no, that worked out. Brad Stevens did what Danny Ainge didn't, and I really did like Danny Ainge as a GM, but there were a lot of trade deadlines and a lot of drafts where I'm like, what is Ainge doing? Like, they weren't bad moves, but it was like, other than getting Kyrie Irving, like, he didn't pull the trigger on a lot of moves, and, I mean, we'll never know what moves he might have made, but I feel like, and again, I'm sure Brad Stevens has, kind of held back on some moves as well, but it seems like every move he's made has worked, bringing back Al Horford, bringing in Derek White, which I thought was supposed to be like a role player. It almost reminds me of Isaiah Thomas, where, Isaiah Thomas was meant to be a pretty good player, and he ended up exceeding those expectations. But no, Brad Stevens, I mean, same with Jaylen Brown. They take what seemed like a random player at the time at number 3, almost like Kristaps Porzingis for the Knicks, which I know the Celtics didn't draft him, but when Kristaps Porzingis was drafted, it was like, who the hell's this guy? And that's why I'm watching the NBA draft tonight. Not to see who goes number 1 or 2, because how often do those guys pan out? Like Victor Wembanyama, whatever his name is, with the Spurs, looks like he's the real deal. He was number 1 last year. But, I mean, it's not often that the number 1 pick becomes, like, the number 1 best player in the league or one of them. Tatum, to me, has exceeded all expectations as a number 3 pick, obviously. I mean, he's a champion. He's the best player on the Celtics. As much as I love Jaylen Brown, I think Tatum's a little better. But it's not a bad problem to have, 2 superstar players. And that's what I mean by, I'm not sitting here anymore going, I hope the Celtics get Kevin Love. I hope the Celtics get, whoever, James Harden, whoever the big player is out there at the time. And I'm not saying, if the Celtics want to add, I'm not going to complain. I think that is one concern, but you don't have to worry about it for maybe a few more years. You have to maybe think about who do you replace some of these guys with. Horford's not going to be around forever. Drew Holiday, they have him for a few more years, Porzingis. So eventually you are going to have to put more players around Tatum and Brown, and eventually, again, this is way down the road, but you're going to have to replace Tatum and Brown. So that you do have to kind of keep cycling this talent, keep doing what you're doing. But right now, I could not be any more happy with how things went this past season. The Celtics are the champions. I'm going to enjoy it for a good long time. And we'll see how next season goes when it gets here. But, yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for joining me on this really long journey of Celtics rebuilding and, falling apart and rebuilding again and all this stuff. It's been spectacular. And hopefully we will be here next year talking about another Celtics title. But even if not, it's been a great ride. Thank you guys so much for watching.